Oh, hello fellow YouTubers, and welcome to episode 5, reading my first self-published novel, Aggravation. You might be able to hear a little bit of background noise. I've got a fan going, because it's very, very warm in the shed tonight. I hope it doesn't disturb you. Anyhow, here we go. So that was Mrs. Curtis, Clyde had thought. No wonder Simon had rolled his eyes and quickly busied himself once again as soon as he had heard her voice. And to think I'd always thought my mother was vocal. Well, she was. But at least she never swore. Why, this woman may very well be the queen bitch of the universe. If that episode is any indication, either that or she's the most sexually frustrated woman on the face of the planet. No doubt her nasty disposition is the reason Simon isolates himself in the backyard shed to all hours and gives that line trimmer a good working out so frequently. Takes his pent-up frustrations out on a piece of wood in the weeds. Poor bugger. Later that evening, Clyde had had a not totally unexpected visit from Simon, spurred on no doubt by the acid tongue of his domineering wife, who reminded Clyde of Glenn Close, with all due respect to Glenn Close herself. The moment Clyde had opened the front door, he could tell Simon didn't want to be here of his own volition, standing as he was with his head down, hands in his pockets, like a child waiting retribution from the headmaster following a schoolyard prank. "Sorry to disturb you, Clyde," he had begun with utmost sincerity, "but my wife said you had words with Julian earlier on, and that I should—" "Come in, Simon," Clyde had said. Clyde was a master of putting people at ease. Well, most people anyway. Learning from a lifetime of experience that you caught more flies with honey than vinegar. No sense in us standing around like two shags on a rock when we can sit in comfort and talk, now is there? Once seated at the table in the kitchen, the only room in the house, Clyde is aware, that seems to put people at ease quicker than any other because of its familiarity and sense of the informal. And after politely refusing Clyde's offer of refreshment, Simon began by saying, "I really am sorry calling upon you at this hour, but if I didn't, I'd never hear the end of it." "Quite all right, Simon. I'm more than aware of your wife's vitriolic demeanour, believe me." "Yes, well, you and a good many others too, I'm sorry to say." Clyde had been able to tell by the tone of his voice and the look of utter discontent on his face that he was a man who needed to get a lot of things off his chest. "If you'd like to talk about it, Simon, I'm more than prepared to listen. Sometimes it's good to talk with someone you know but don't know, if you know what I mean." "Maybe you're right, because I'm just about at my wit's end. I'm all ears. The floor is yours." He had smiled, a nervous smile, then said, "I know she wasn't happy moving to Welcome and leaving her family and friends behind in Dubbo, but that was 6 years ago. I had expected she would come around and get to like being here eventually. But all that has happened is a dramatic change to her personality. A Jekyll to Hyde transformation is what it is. Goes off at the slightest of things. She does and doesn't mince her words while she's at it. It's bad enough that she has an anger management problem, but coupled with her foul language, her behaviour has become intolerable. Yet I don't know what's wrong with her, and every time I ask, all she does is snap my head off. She probably doesn't know what's wrong with her herself, but there's something. To that there is no doubt." "Has she sought psychological help?" Clyde had asked. Simon had shook his head, then said no. Simon had shook his head, then said, "No. I've tried time and time to convince her that she does need help, but she won't have a bar of it. Tells me I'm the one who must be crazy to think that way. Sometimes I'm fearful that she'll do something violent when in one of her enraged states. She'd never hurt Julian, at least I don't think she would, but me or someone else I'm not so sure about. Things have gotten so bad of late that I suggested we move back to Dubbo. Bet you won't have a bar of that either. I tell you, Clyde, I just don't know what to do. Clyde was more than familiar with what Simon was saying from his own childhood experiences with his mother, for she too had shown many of the symptoms Simon was describing. She had always been a constant nag in Clyde's mind, like a dog with a bone that bit she was, gnawing away a bit at a time, then bury it up and dig it up, and gnaw some more. When it came to making noise, she was in a league of her own without a shadow of a doubt. The undisputed world champion of chronic verbal diarrhea. And she wasn't just happy making his father's life miserable, but so too Clyde's. She had wanted a girl with her one and only pregnancy, but it wasn't to be, and barely a day went by when she wouldn't let Clyde know how disappointed she had been when he was born. The only time she was ever remotely happy with his existence was when he was ill, because it was times like those that she had the attention and sympathy of other mothers. And the sicker Clyde was, the more attention and sympathy she received. She liked the attention and sympathy so much that she would drag Clyde off to the family doctor at the first sign of a sniffle or a sneeze, which, unfortunately for Clyde, as the years progressed and the attention and sympathy waned, evolved into something more sinister in order for her to maintain the attention and sympathy she thought she rightfully deserved. Munchausen by proxy we know it to be today, but when Clyde was a boy it was a psychosis only known by a specialist few, and to the eyes of the family GP, the injuries to Clyde were nothing more than the result of a boy being a boy with perhaps a middle ear infection that made him a little clumsy, or a problem with his eyesight, or a combination of the two. It all made perfect sense to his mother, and at first it made perfect sense to Clyde too. Perfect sense. Even when all the test results had proven negative, it still made perfect sense to Clyde. After all, she was his mother. And if she said he wandered about with his head in the clouds, then she would know that that was the reason enough why he was accident-prone. Clyde was pretty sure he didn't wander about aimlessly, but there was no reason why he should doubt his mother. No reason whatsoever. A broken left arm and a broken right clavicle in the span of 6 months. And Clyde did doubt his mother. Doubted her with every fibre of his existence. He had been 8 at the time, and had thought the fall that broke his arm was an accident. That his mother had stepped back as she hung the washing on the line that very instant he was at her side and caught his left shin on her left ankle. Tripped and fell. And he had continued to think all through the mending period that it was nothing more than an accident. And the attention and kind words from his mother were heartfelt and genuine, the way a mother is expected and should behave when the child has been injured and in pain and discomfort. And he had thought too, and not for the first time, that his mother's aura of well-being was because she was once again relaxed and at ease, that he was recuperating well, safe and sound indoors, instead of out and about and fearful that her only child, clumsy as he was, would have another accident, rather than the attention and sympathy she was receiving, not only from the mothers of his friends but the family doctor too, that he wasn't privileged to and never knew existed. His father didn't know it existed either. But when he tumbled down the flight of stairs that led to the back door of the house and broke his right clavicle, he knew it wasn't an accident, no matter how vehemently his mother had protested to the contrary. "How dare you accuse your mother of such a thing? Why, it's nothing but a barefaced lie." Push you indeed. What an absolutely disgusting thing to say. But Clyde knew different. His mother knew that he knew different, and he was right. And when his father came to his bedside in the Royal Alexandra Hospital for Children the night of that day, he believed every word that his son had said. His father didn't want to believe it. He tried desperately not to believe it. But in the end he knew it to be true. His wife, the woman he'd been married to for 15 years, was an abuser. Clyde had spent 14 days in hospital before returning to the family home, only to find that his mother wasn't there. "Your mother has gone away to spend some time with a sister, Clyde," his father had said. "She's not a well woman, and Dr. Raymond suggested it might be good for all concerned." And Clyde had thought, "I hope she doesn't come back, ever." She did, 3 months later, and a totally different woman she was. Subservient, as if the time she had spent away hadn't been spent with a blood sister, but with a sister of the Wimple in Cloisters. But in little more than a year later she became paranoid, convinced beyond all reason that her son was possessed by a demon, or perhaps the devil himself. For what other reason could there be for the sudden appearance of that mark upon his forehead, and the strange inexplicable things that had been happening about him? But there was no mark on Clyde's forehead, nor were strange and inexplicable things happening about him. Only in the hallucinatory mind of a woman suffering from the psychosis of schizophrenia was that being seen in those things happening. "You have the mark of the devil on your forehead, Clyde," she would say venomously. "The 666 that God branded the archangel Lucifer with before he expelled him from heaven. I always knew you were evil." And as Clyde cowered from her false accusations, crying and pleading silently for her to stop, she would suddenly wrap her arms about him and beg for his forgiveness, and not tell his father what had happened. And for a while he didn't. For a while he prayed to God, asking him, pleading with him to make his mother better. And when God didn't make his mother better, then he told his father. Perhaps he had told his father earlier his mother might not have done what she did. But who can say what goes on in the mind of one afflicted so? Certainly not a 9-year-old. His father had found her naked in a half-full bath of red water, both wrists slashed with a razor blade from his father's Gillette razor, at a time Clyde was visiting his aunt's and uncle's property. Clyde had accepted what his father had told him, and that his mother had had a brain tumour that was responsible for her strange behaviour, and she had died as a result of it. Clyde had arrived home in time to attend the funeral, but he'd been unable to shed a tear over the woman she was and the mother she had never been. That had happened in 1954. His father, still a reasonably young man at 41, never remarried, being content to raise his son by himself until his passing in 1980 following pneumonia brought on by a particular virulent case of influenza. The last will and testament, Arthur Fillimore stipulated that he wanted to be cremated, his ashes and final resting place in an urn atop the fireplace mantel in the lounge room of MacArthur House. Clyde had refrained from visiting his mother's grave for 10 years, but with maturity came forgiveness and empathy. After all, she was his mother, the woman who had given birth to him regardless her disappointment. And if for those 2 reasons and those 2 reasons only, she was deserving of his respect. What you need to do, Simon, is fight fire with fire. Give her a dose of her own medicine and see how she responds. You've probably, and I mean this with all due respect, let her get away with it for too long, and now she's a domineering young woman, who will later become a domineering older woman, if something isn't done to stop it. But don't, and it's an important but don't under any circumstances do so when your son is around. He's probably already suffering in silence as it is, and children at his age are very vulnerable in a hostile environment, often thinking they are responsible for it. Yes, you're right, I have let it go on for too long. But what happens if it doesn't work? What if the situation gets totally out of control? What then? Lock yourself in a room and phone the police. Maybe being arrested will be the wake-up call she desperately needs. Plan ahead for the confrontation by having Julian stay overnight at a friend's house. That way, if push comes to shove, he won't come home unexpectedly to find his mother missing. Oh sure, the whole town will know she's been arrested in no time at all, and Julian will be upset with you. But sometimes we have to be prepared to take a little with the prospect of greater return in the future. There is, of course, the very real possibility that nothing like that will happen, and you might just end up having the best sex you've ever had and you'll both live happily ever after. You make it sound so easy. It is easy, Simon, if you're prepared to take a stand. It might not be the stand you want to take, but it's the stand you must take unless you want it to continue, or you can come up with some other way to deal with it. Simon remained silent, drumming the fingers of his right hand on the tabletop, as Clyde sat back wondering if the young man was digesting what he had said, or was fantasizing about being the dominant male ravishing his wife, maybe going as far, imagining her wearing handcuffs. "I'll have to think about it, Clyde," he had finally said. "But I will do something, of that you can be assured." "Certainly. No need to rush things. But do remember tide waits for no man." Simon had nodded his head several times, and then said, "Anyhow, I've taken enough of your time, and It's perfectly all right, Simon. No trouble at all," Clyde had said, standing. "But what about the purpose of your visit?" Standing behind the chair he had just vacated, his face a mild shade of red, Simon opened his mouth to say something, but nothing came out. "Never mind. Couldn't have been that important now, could it?" Clyde had said, ushering Simon from the kitchen. "But any time you feel the need to talk, my door will always be open for you. Any time at all." At the front door, Simon had said, "Thank you, Clyde. It's nice to know some people do care." "Of course. And good night, Simon." "Good night, Clyde." Care, Clyde had thought, closing the door. "I don't care at all, you silly fool of a man." 5 minutes later, a mug of freshly brewed tea on the kitchen table before him, Clyde had wondered what Simon had said to his dearly beloved, waiting impatiently for him to return home. He had listened with intent as the jug had chattered away for the unmistakable thrill of her voice, but hadn't heard anything. How he'd love to be a fly on the wall. She would have demanded to know what had transpired. There was no doubt about that. So what had he said to her? Lied through his teeth, if he had any sense at all. As he had sipped his tea, he had cupped a hand to an ear. But all had remained quiet. "Oh well," he had muttered, "tomorrow is another day." But as the days became weeks, the weeks months, nothing had changed except for the gradual depletion of his sister's accumulation. But then Clyde hadn't really expected it would. Julian persisted with his aggravating noise. Words were exchanged, obscenities hurled. Simon obviously as lily-livered as Clyde expected he was. So ashamed he was that he couldn't look Clyde in the eye, nor did he possess the gumption to come a-knocking to share a word with what he thought was a sympathetic ear. Nor did a day barely pass when the distant thump, thump, thump of the touring noisemakers have Clyde shaking his head at the sheer incongruity of it all, a constant unpleasant reminder of a challenge as yet to be instigated, but one the taking up of the gauntlet had ensured it would. Charlie remained a bit of a worry, catching him out when least he expected it, but never around if by chance Clyde needed an extra pair of hands. Work was obviously a four-letter word to Charlie, perhaps even totally alien to him. He employed someone to mow his lawn even though he owned a ride-on mower, spared no expense. Clyde knew that for a fact because he'd seen it being delivered. It and many other things as well. The guy who mows the lawn uses the ride-on. But why the hell would someone buy something for someone else to use when that someone else was charging you for the privilege of using it? Didn't make sense. The man was a complete and utter imbecile. No doubt about it whatsoever. Buying just for the sake of buying is what he did. Why, it was more than plausible for Clyde to think that the inside of his house was chock-a-block full of brand new things that hadn't been used and more than likely never would be used. And he wasn't just forgetful. That was patently obvious. But suffering from dementia 101. By the way he signed for deliveries, then left them sitting on the veranda for days on end. "Hey, Clyde, you want to see all the things I just bought? Spared no expense." "You bought the damn things a week ago, you bloody idiot, and left the lot on the veranda." was what Clyde would be thinking. But he always yelled, "Some other time, Charlie, okay?" Knowing full well there would come a time when he wouldn't be able to put it off any longer, and he'd just have to go and have a look. Spared no expense. Jesus H. Christ. There are only two people Clyde looked forward to seeing, Sandy Merriweather and Louise Mapleton. Sandy popped over now and then just to see how Clyde was faring with the clean-up. On one of his earlier visits, the first day Clyde had begun to clear out the single-car garage, Sandy had found Clyde manhandling bricks, roof tiles, and capping from the very front of the garage to his trailer. "Good grief, Clyde," Sandy had said, "why don't you get Wayne Stevens and his Bobcat to handle that stuff? Otherwise you'll be here for a month of Sundays." Clyde had smiled at his friend, wiping his brow with the back of a hand, and said, "To be perfectly honest, Sandy, the thought never occurred to me." "Yes, well, I can understand that. Sometimes we get so involved in doing something that's all we think about. I know, I've been there and done the same thing myself until Emma will ask me if I'm daft. Daft. Nowadays they work smarter than harder. Get a machine to do the hard work rather than a pick and shovel. Get Wayne over here and he'd have that stuff in the back of his tip truck in less than 2 hours. Well, my name ain't Sandy Harold Merriweather. Money well spent it will be too. You mark my words. I think I might do just that. What you want to do before you get Wayne over is organise other jobs as well. I'd do that if I could, but I don't know what's behind this lot here or what's behind the wall of stuff in the back shed. I know there's a lot of firewood because I saw it looking through the side window. But other than that and the boxes of bottles and cans to the front, I haven't got a clue." "So all this stuff was put here by the sisters," Sandy said. "I knew they were eccentric, but mind-boggling, isn't it? I remember when they had the corrugated iron roof installed and the ensuite added to the master bedroom, but I had thought all the rubble had been taken to the tip. Now I know different." "Did you know the sisters, Sandy?" "No, not really. Everyone in the town knew of them, but no one knew them personally, at least as far as I'm aware. Bob Lawn said they were into the supernatural, UFOs, all that kind of stuff. Going on to say they reckon there was a pyramid buried under Tor Hill. How would he know that? Maybe his parents had known the family and they continued their association with Harriet and Henrietta after their mother and father passed. Yes, I guess that must be it. As for all that hocus pocus stuff, well, that's all it is as far as I'm concerned. I take it then you've never seen strange lights in the night sky." "Seen lights? There's nothing strange about them. Just plain them satellites is all there is." "What about the sightings of a big cat and ape-like creature that I read about in the local paper? And the mutilations of sheep and cattle? Could be a big cat around, I suppose. Could be any number around, with what I see on television. Escaped from circuses more than likely. But there could be feral cats too. Seen a few of them I have. Most are bigger than a family pet, but some are twice as big and then some. But all of them are just plain mean and nasty things. Tear you to pieces they would given half the chance. I know. I've come upon the odd one caught in a rabbit trap, when I used to trap rabbits to earn a few extra quid. Long time ago that was, but they'd still be around. Probably been around since the first fleet, for all I know. As for their mutilations, they've been going on for donkey's years. Feral dogs kill and mutilate just for the fun of it, they do, not because they're hungry. People used to blame the dingoes, but they hunt and kill for survival and nothing else. As for that big ape thing, that's nothing more than people's imagination. Jump at the side of their own shadow, some people do, then blame it on something else. Sandy, Clyde had thought, was as down to earth as the grass under his shoes. "You've been to Tor Hill, haven't you, Sandy?" "More times than I can remember." "Why?" "How do you feel about the area there?" "I've been there a couple of times, and for some unknown reason I feel uneasy, restless. Now there's something untoward is going to happen." "You're a city fella. Nothing unusual about that. City folk go into the bush not realising how empty it is, and they spook themselves. Whereas people like me who have lived all their lives in the bush are comfortable with it. As for Tor Hill, it doesn't bother me at all. Never has." "Have you climbed the hill?" When I was younger, and even then it was a steep climb, on your hands and knees the closer you got to the top. Seen the biggest kangaroo on top of that hill I ever did see. Thought my brain must have been starved for oxygen, and I was hallucinating. But it was there all right. I thought you said you hadn't seen anything stranger than your next. Wasn't anything strange about it. I knew what it was, and it was big. Anyhow, why don't you close them doors to that garage, and you and me go and wet a line, instead of standing around talking about things that no one really knows anything about. Louise Mapleton, Clyde sees every Monday at the cafe, come rain, hail or shine. So much of a regular now that Louise addresses him by his first name. She can do no wrong in Clyde's eyes, and he wishes that he was 40 years younger. With Monday trade being slow as always, he has been able to talk and become acquainted with her. Although not a totally open book, she is nonetheless prepared to talk openly about most things, and occasionally take Clyde into her confidence if something is bothering her. Clyde is now convinced that what bothers her at present is the same thing that had bothered her the first time they met 8 months ago. She is stuck between a rock and a hard place, without prospects for the future, and she is unhappy because of it. Clyde has profound empathy for her, knowing how hard it must be for many young people living in small country towns where there are few, if any, opportunities for them to secure their futures and realise their ambitions. Yet she faces a conundrum, inasmuch that she feels so at home living with her parents and brother on the family property, but wants so much to better herself, fully aware she is unlikely to do so in welcome. "What is it you'd like to do?" Clyde had asked on one occasion. "That's the problem. I don't know. I know I don't want to work for someone else for the rest of my life, but I don't know how I can be self-employed in a small town like Welcome." "And you think you might be able to do that somewhere else?" She had remained silent for a few seconds and said with resignation and a shrug of her shoulders, "I don't know. Really, I don't." "Do you have a special talent? A gift from God, as some would say?" Clyde had asked. Without hesitation, she had replied, "Sculpting. Clay sculpting." "Well, there you go then," Clyde had said. "Start a business online. Sell what you make, whatever that may be. Take it one step further and offer to make clay busts of people and members of their family. People would love that, I'm sure. I know I would. In fact, make a bust of me and not only will I pay you for it, but I'll have it photographed and place the image inside the front cover of my latest novel with your website address below it." "Really? You would do that for me?" "Of course I would. Be only too happy to help you any way I can. All you have to do is ask." She was so happy that she threw her arms around Clyde's neck and kissed him on the cheek. And by God, how he had wished at that moment that he was 40 years younger. "I take it you'll be able to make a bust from a couple of photographs, wouldn't you? You know, full face and profile, that sort of thing." "Oh yes, no problem whatsoever." And you do have everything you need to go into full production?" "Yes, I think so." "Might not be a bad idea to sit yourself down with a pad and pen and write down what you already have along with what you think you might need. Write down questions, whatever questions that might pop into your head, and then answer them objectively. Objectivity is the key. You're excited now and I'm excited for you. But what seems like a good idea now might not seem good once you've taken the time to be self-analytical. I doubt very much that will be the case, but just remember that you're taking a bold step towards self-reliance. And if you're not prepared to be totally honest with yourself and your capabilities, then you're better off not doing anything at all, because you'll be deluding yourself. In other words, don't put the cart before the horse, otherwise you'll get nowhere." I will, I promise. And whatever you do, you must be realistic to how long it takes you to do a job. When you do something for pleasure, it doesn't matter how long it takes to finish it. But once a hobby becomes a business, time is of the essence, and you have to be paid accordingly, if you know what I mean. I do. Good. Anyhow, I'll be off, and I'll get a couple of photographs taken and drop them off in the next few days, and then we'll see what an artician you are, my dear young friend. You want me to do what? Sandy had said. I want you to take a couple of photographs of me of my head. Bloody hell, Clyde, I'm no good at taking pictures. Can't you get someone else to do it? You don't have to be good. I'll set the camera on a tripod and all you have to do is tell me which way I need to move so my head is in the centre of the LCD screen, then press the shutter release. It's easy. It might be easy for you, but I'm bound to bugger it up. I'm all thumbs when it comes to technological things, I am. I'd take the photograph myself if it wasn't that I need one in profile. Be a lot of fidgeting around to take that one by myself. You mean to get that nose of yours in the picture? Is that what you're saying? No, I'm not saying that at all, you cheeky bugger. You know, Clyde, anyone ever tell you look like Basil Rathbone? Not until now, no. But I always thought I bore a resemblance. Anyhow, don't change the subject. You going to take those photographs, or do you want me to struggle doing it myself? Oh, well, considering you put it that way, I guess I ain't got no choice. Thank you. What do you want the pictures for anyway? Louise Mapleton is going to sculpt a bust of me, and then I'm going to put an image of that bust on the inside of the cover of my latest book to advertise her new venture. New venture? I didn't know she had an old one. Been working in the cafe since she left high school. Well, she mightn't be for much longer with what she plans to do. And before you ask, no, I won't tell you until after you take the 2 photographs. 10 minutes later, see, told you, you wouldn't have any problem. Yeah, okay, but you haven't seen the pictures yet, so don't get too carried away. Have them printed out in a couple of minutes. A couple of minutes? Don't you have to go to the chemist to do that? Nope, all I have to do is plug the camera into this USB port here, enter into the print shop program, then download the images from the camera to the computer, and there you go. And they look pretty good to me. And all I have to do is print a copy of each. So what's this venture Louise is getting herself into? Well, less than 2 minutes later. Sounds like a pretty good idea to me. She's always been clever with her hands, Louise has. I sure hope it all works out for her. If she runs her business with half the dedication she has to her job, then her success is guaranteed. I miss not seeing her at the cafe, Sandy had said. Won't be the same without her there. I agree with you wholeheartedly. Still, it was bound to happen sooner or later. Can't expect a young woman like Louise to spend her entire life waiting on tables. Now can you? No, I suppose not. Sid and Mary Locke, them's the folk who own the cafe. They'll miss her something terrible, they will. They're so used to having Louise around, it'd be like losing a member of their own family, it will. I'm sure it will be, but I'm also sure they'll be happy for her. Anyhow, how's that garage shaping up? Find anything in there worth keeping? A few things, but not a lot. You can come and have a look if you want to. Did you get Wayne his bobcat and truck over here to clear up that rubble? Yes, that and other stuff as well. Standing to the front of the garage, Sandy had stated the obvious. I see you got rid of those 2 old doors. And glad to be rid of them, I am. Blasted, rickety, rotten things they were. I'm even thinking I might have it demolished and replaced with a double. What do you think? Sounds like a damn good idea. Reckon I could dedicate a part of one half to all the things of the sisters that were too good to throw away. Stone the crows, Clyde, some of them things could be worth a quid or 2. Yes, I thought so too. Sandy picked up one of the clear glass bottles and said, I remember these bottles when I was a kid. Weren't worth anything but the return deposit in those days. Don't know what they'd be worth today, but it's bound to be a lot more than 3pence. And all those coloured bottles and jars bound to be worth a few bob each, I'd reckon. Don't know about that old kerosene refrigerator, though, unless it works. I kept it because I like the look of it. A table and 2 chairs, and those 2 ladies' bicycles as well. Haven't got any use for all the gardening tools and the wheelbarrow, but I like the look of them too and just couldn't bring myself to get rid of them. So what else was taking up space in here? Scores and scores of cardboard boxes filled with empty tin cans and glass jars. The kind that contain honey and jam and that sort of thing. And there must have been an equal amount of neatly tied bundles of flattened cardboard food packaging as well. I'm surprised you didn't count them like you did with them newspapers in the house. As your Alma would say, don't be daft. And besides, what makes you think I counted the newspapers? You told me there were 3,000 and so many, so I thought you must have. No, they were all in running order. It was only a simple mathematical exercise. I'm glad to hear that, Clyde. I thought you might have been one of those impulsive-compulsive types. Yeah, one of them. The only thing I'm in the habit of counting is my change. Yeah, me too. And my lotto numbers, for all the good it does me. Clyde chuckled and said, let's go fishing, Sandy. And I'll drop the 2 photographs off to Louise on my way to the river. An hour ago, the Melbourne Cup had been run and won by American, and Clyde was now standing under the shade of the front veranda, a mug of tea resting atop the waist-high sandstone capping of the west brick parapet, watching Julian, a study of absolute concentration, as he paddled the rubber ball to and fro, forward and back, over and over and over. Whop, 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 whop. God damn it, he mumbled, just look at that little shit. Whop, 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 whop. Clyde had heard the aggravating noise begin in earnest, just as he had poured his second mug of tea a few minutes after turning off the television, following the post-race presentation of the Melbourne Cup to the victorious owner. Horse racing in general wasn't of any interest to Clyde, but he always made a point of watching the race that stopped the nation. He never wagered a bet. He wasn't a betting man. But he always nominated a horse just for the fun of it. Desperado failed to finish. Whop, 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 whop. Sipping tea, he continued to eyeball the focus of his discontent, wishing he had some magical power to be able by sheer force of will to deviate the rebounding ball away from the face of the paddle to impact with the child's groin instead. Boy, oh boy, wouldn't that bring tears to his eyes, Clyde thought. Smack bang right into the gonads. The good old family jewels, the nuts, the golden target. Oh yeah, whop, 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 whop. Why, the little wanker wouldn't know what had hit him. For a split second he continued to muse, but he sure as hell dropped that paddle quick smart. Whop, 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 whop. Grab his balls and hit that concrete like a bag of shit he would, screaming and crying and writhing in agony. Wouldn't know which way was up, he wouldn't. By God, I'd love to see what his psycho mother would do. She'd be out of that house in a flash thinking someone was strangling him. Whop, 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 whop. Probably be cursing for all she was worth, thinking I'd done something to him. I'd like to if I knew I'd get away with it. Go on, ball. Go, 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 go. Whop, 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 whop. No, of course not. Oh well, I can but hope. Whop, 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 whop. No sense standing here raising my blood pressure, otherwise I might do something I'll live long to regret. See you later, you little fuck, Clyde muttered, turning his back on the scene. Hope I live long enough to piss on your grave, he added, opening the security screen door. Your mother's too, he added, closing the front door behind him. But no sooner had he entered the kitchen did he hear a scream that stopped him dead in his tracks that, a second or two later, became a drawn-out wail of someone in pain that was followed by a few moments later with, Mom! Mom! It was almost immediately followed with, What the fuck has he done to you now? Bloody hell, Clyde said out loud, don't tell me the highly improbable has happened. After placing his mug in the kitchen sink, Clyde wasted no time heading to the round room where, standing with his hands clasped behind his back as he looked at the open window, he could hear but not see Julian sobbing and obviously in pain as his mother spoke reassuring words. It's all right, my darling. Yes, I know it hurts, and it's sore, but once I put an ice pack on that eye, the hurt and pain will quickly go away. Oh, only an eye, Clyde muttered. Still, might be enough to give him second thoughts the next time the idea of paddling the old rubber ball pops into his head. Now it's only that bloody basketball. to be worried about. But not for a while, I would think. No. He'll have a black eye and will be wincing every time he blinks for a week or so. So I doubt the urge will present itself for at least that period. Never would be better, but you can't have everything your own way. Pity that. Such a pity. Flopping into an easy chair, Clyde inhaled deeply through his nose, then exhaled slowly out of his mouth, a feeling of utter contentment as he thought, isn't it amazing how quickly things can change for the better? Inhale, exhale. How strange it is too how you can think of something happening and sometimes it does. Is there perhaps an inexplicable force at work in times like those? Or is it just plain coincidence? One of those things. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. I don't know. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale, inhale. The next thing he knew, the fading light of the late afternoon streaming in through the lounge room windows had been replaced with the darkness of nightfall. The only luminescence in the room that of the red standby light of the television and the digital clock of the VCR DVD combo. Blinking his eyes several times, he then looked at the clock to check the time, a purely instinctive reaction that failed to produce a result for still blurry eyes. It didn't matter. 6 o'clock, 8 o'clock, it wasn't important. But as he yawned and stretched, pressing his back hard against the backrest, he thought he heard a voice, soft but distinct nonetheless. Who are you? Who am I, he thought, lowering his arms. It was unusual for Clyde to sleep through the day, but at that moment he wondered if he was still asleep and dreaming. Hello, he said out loud. Anyone there? The words no sooner out of his mouth than a thought. What a stupid thing to say. How many times have you seen someone in a movie or television show say those very words while standing in the dark? And you had said what a stupid thing it was to do. How many times, Clyde? Yes, well, plenty of times, he muttered, running his fingers through his short-cropped hair. Looking around, knowing full well he couldn't see anything, he muttered, must have been half awake and I imagined it. Placing his hands on the armrest, he eased himself upright where, just for a couple of seconds, he felt light-headed, staggered and reeled and almost sat down again. Must be hungry, he reasoned. With an easy action he gained his full height and closed his eyes as he stretched his neck muscles. Better. 6 paces to his immediate left was the switch of the central overhead light. A short distance, but one he only managed to travel half of before the faint words, "Who are you?" struck fear in his heart and he froze on the spot between mid-stride. Heart racing, eyes wide, mouth open and breathing rapidly through it. Suddenly he became aware of a presence close to him, like it was when you know you're being watched from behind your back. And instantly the hairs on the back of his neck bristled, and he felt an icy shiver run down his spine. Unsure if he thought or muttered, "This can't be happening, there are no such things as ghosts," but certain that he had pissed himself. Not a release where he could feel the liquid running down his legs, but enough of one to dampen the front of his underpants and the crotch of his trousers. Clyde had been this scared only once before, and that was when he was 12 and a friend, fooling around as friends do, had held his head under water of the public swimming pool in Victoria Park on Broadway, Sydney. For so long he thought he would drown. He had pissed himself then, too. He could vaguely remember the rush of warm liquid as he had struggled with the desperation of one fighting for survival, forcing his friend to set him loose. But here the cold wetness was all too real, and the only thing holding him back was he himself. Are you game enough, Clyde? Look behind you. You know there's nothing there. Go on, Clyde. Do it. Do it. Do it. Are you so afraid of what you know can't be real and doesn't exist that you won't look at what isn't there because it may very well be? Ghosts and goblins and the boogeyman, Clyde. Real or imagined, but all the same. Are you game enough, Clyde? No, he yelled. Then there was light, but he couldn't remember moving forward, reaching out for, finding the switch and pressing it down. Standing in the front doorway of the lounge room on legs so weak they trembled, the fingers of his right hand covering the light switch, glued to the light switch, he suddenly realised how cold he was, how afraid he was, even with the light on. With eyes still wide, he scanned the room, not knowing what he expected to see, not knowing if he'd recognise whatever it was if he did. But there was nothing there that shouldn't be there. Peeling his hand away from the switch, he dragged both palms down the front of his shirt, flinching when his hand touched the damp material of his crotch. "Fucking hell," he muttered. It was a wake-up call so desperately needed, and one he reacted to without hesitation, turning, then stepping into the hallway and continuing on to his bedroom, turning on every light for the sheer comfort and reassurance only light could offer, once woken from a nightmare. With his clothes on a crumpled heap on the ensuite floor, he stepped under the shower, sliding and closing behind him the two glass panels. Thankful there wasn't an opaque curtain, so reminiscent of the shower scene in Psycho. With his nerves still on edge, it would have been easy for him to imagine all sorts of things, no matter how impossible those things might be, or at least as impossible as he had once thought they might be. He isn't so sure now. He isn't sure about many things since settling in Welcome. He had believed in the existence of UFOs ever since the newspaper reports of the Tully saucer nest in 1966. That belief bolstered with the flood of recorded sightings worldwide during the past 2 decades. Alien abductions, however, with the exception of the Betty and Barney Hill incident Sandy had once mentioned in passing, was something he had never given serious consideration to until reading Whitley Strieber's book Communion in 1988, after which, and to the present day, there have been too many such reports far too often to be taken lightly. But since his first and subsequent visits to Tor Hill, he is all but convinced that the two are real, and the word believe is nothing but a verb. Are you game enough, Clyde? With his shower behind him and dressed in clean clothes, Clyde was feeling cleansed but far from relaxed. His normal routine after showering was to slip into his pyjamas and don a dressing gown. But not tonight. Maybe not tomorrow night either. The thought of the unthinkable happening again dressed in only pyjamas made him feel vulnerable. He was feeling vulnerable enough as it was. So vulnerable in fact that every light in the house was on, including the bathroom and the laundry. He had put the laundry light on when he placed his dirty clothes and towel into the washing machine and left it on. 5 minutes later he had returned to the laundry and started the washing machine, knowing that sleep would be denied him and he might as well make the most of his free time. He would place the wash into the dryer later. Back in the kitchen he made a fresh pot of tea and a chicken sandwich and plucked up the courage to return to the lounge room and turn on the television. He didn't care what was on. He just wanted to hear the sound of other voices. Even the talk-over voices of the commercials would sound good to him. They did. And as he stood waiting for the tea to draw, he had a thought. Maybe I should phone and ask Andy to come over, so I can talk to him about what just happened. I really feel I need to do that. Need to get it off my chest sooner, rather than later. It's early yet, and I'm sure he wouldn't mind. Yes, I'll do that. Sure, I'll come over, Sandy replied. Was only sitting in my chair in front of the TV dozing. Goddamn nothing on the box these days worth watching most of the time. Thank you, Sandy. I really appreciate it. See you shortly. Bye. For what seemed to Clyde to take no time at all, and he was glad for it, Sandy was sitting at one end of the kitchen table, a mug of black tea before him. Clyde at the opposite end, a mug of white tea before him. So what you want to talk about, Clyde? Sandy asked. Well, Clyde began, his eyes down as he fiddled with the mug. It's, and you won't believe me, but a little earlier, he chuckled nervously, I heard a voice say, well, come on, Clyde, stop beating around the bush and spit it out. Say, who are you? He paused momentarily and said, twice. The same words twice. You must have been dreaming, Sandy replied, matter-of-factly. That happens to me all the time when Alma calls out my name real loud when I'm napping. That's what I thought the first time. But when it happened again, I was standing up and fully awake. Oh, right. Then you must have imagined it. No way. I heard those words as clearly as I can hear yours. After taking a sip of tea, then another, Sandy said, "You're serious, aren't you?" Clyde nodded and took a sip of his tea, then said, "And I don't mind admitting it scared the living daylights out of me. Is that the reason the house lit up like a Christmas tree?" Clyde nodded again. "Do you have the TV or radio on at the time?" "No." "You sure, Clyde? Sometimes you can have the radio on real low and forget it's on." Clyde shook his head then said, "I haven't listened to the radio for ages, Sandy." "Oh, come on, Clyde. There must be a logical explanation for it. None that I can think of. And don't you dare say what I think you're going to say, because that ain't possible." So Clyde said nothing and sipped his tea, fully aware that the longer he remained silent, the more Sandy would want him to say what he didn't want to hear. "Go on then," Sandy finally said. "Say it." "The house is haunted," Clyde said. Now it was Sandy's turn to remain silent. And as Sandy sipped his tea and Clyde sipped his, he was wondering what Sandy was thinking. Sandy was thinking, "I knew this place was haunted." Ah. Oof. I want to thank you for watching, listening, or both. And until next time, bye for now.